How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji, host of Tier Talk, and October 12th, sad day. Sad day. We lost two heroes. Two heroes. North Carolina inmates tried to escape, and they took the lives of two heroes. They injured many more officers, but they took the lives of Officer Justin Smith and Correctional Manager Veronica Darren. And what gets me concerned is when a story like this happens, I always look for national attention. And the reason why is because when these stories occur, they're usually connected to a bigger concern. Concerns that need to be addressed that usually get unheard. And unfortunately, when they're not addressed, we become retroactive when we should be preventing. And I looked for national attention on this story. I did, and I saw just quick little blurbs. Quick little blurbs. It's nothing. Small. Nothing that takes note of the concerns that corrections is going through on a national level, and definitely nothing that marks the heroes and the sacrifices that correctional staff make every day, including the two that we just lost. They paid the ultimate sacrifice in their service to the public to prevent inmates from escaping. You know, the attention is just to thank them. Make sure the family knows that we feel the loss with them. Officer Justin Smith, Correctional Manager Veronica Darren, thank you. You know, when we had a riot back in February of 2017, we lost another hero. His name was Lieutenant Stephen Floyd. And the reason why this was frustrating was because frontline staff brought the concerns to management, and they felt that management was not listening. They talked about the understaffed facilities. They talked about the status of the inmates. You know, like, are these inmates properly classified? And they felt that management just wasn't listening. And as the case progressed, it was funny because management's response to that was, and I did a show on this, was that they don't have a responsibility for the safety of the people that work for them, which obviously you do. I mean, that's why we have policies and procedures in play, you know. But what made that frustrating was that it could have been prevented, because the concerns are being brought to management, and they're hoping, frontline's hoping, that we do something. Management does something so they're not as vulnerable. And it didn't happen. And then that led to the riot in Delaware. And then as I'm reading here, you know, reading some of the reports, but also talking to some of the front line that talks to me, they feel the same way. They feel that there are concerns that must be addressed, and they feel that they're not being heard. And these are national concerns. So you want stories like this to make it out to the national media, because that's when it gets heard. That's when people start asking questions and try to understand what's going on behind these walls, because no one knows. We're not in public's view. The only time they find out or they care is when something happens, and at that point it's too late. You know, we can't play checkers. We can't be reactive. We have to play chess, and chess involves listening to the front line so we could be steps ahead of the inmate population in case they decide to do anything foolish. Understaffing is a major concern right now on a national level. You know, you got to realize something. These officers are surrounded by individuals that don't want to be there. No matter what public paints a picture of, there's animosity behind that wall. There's danger behind that wall. And these officers risk their lives the moment they go in. And they're severely outnumbered. One officer to 120 inmates, maybe even more. Open areas. Takes a lot of courage to walk behind that wall and do that job. Because two things here. You got people that don't want to be there, but the officer knows that there's a reason why they're there. But they do their job. They do what they're supposed to do. And they sacrifice themselves for the greater good. And when that happens, we need to make sure the public knows of that sacrifice. We need to make sure that the public is aware and gives that sacrifice a bit of respect. And then when issues like this occur, another reason why you want it in the mainstream is because we're going to want to go back and see, could we have done anything different? Just like we're doing with the mass shooting in Las Vegas. We're going back to see what we could do differently. And we're looking at it collectively, a nation, internationally. we're looking at it as, could something been done to prevent? Well, when we lose heroes like Officer Justin Smith and Veronica Darden, well, then we got to go back and do the same thing for them, so they don't die in vain. And we can make sure that when our staff, the staff that works behind the wall, we want to make sure that they're less vulnerable. We want to make sure we're doing what we can collectively to protect those that are protecting us. That's the key. So when you hear concerns that make it to the mainstream, if the mainstream allows those concerns to be aired, then we need to listen, because these are the people that are affected. And right now, corrections on a national level is disenfranchised. They're upset, because they have concerns, but these concerns are not being heard. And then the problem here is when something happens, we are upset because we try to prevent it. We try to do what we can so no one else would get hurt, but no one listens to us. Then we go back and it's like, I told you so. Well, that's a crappy I told you so. Because the consequence is severe. So today I want to talk about a couple of things that I'm sure could be applied generally to corrections all across the country, maybe across the world, to jails and prisons. One concern is definitely the understaffing. We've gotten to a point now where there's just no incentive to want to be in corrections. And that goes for the people that are already in there, that we're having trouble retaining, the people with experience and knowledge that we need behind that wall, and the people that we want to invite into the profession. The people that we want to work in this profession, the people that if I was on the front line, I'd want to be next to. But without the proper incentive, without the proper pay, proper benefits, and the change, wanting to privatize in some places and pushing out the unions and not protecting the employees like real first responders and not seeing them as first responders and law enforcement professionals, there's no incentive. On top of the money, on top of the benefits, you got to have that recognition of what these people do, and they are law enforcement professionals. And it's sad to see that some of my own people would argue that. Don't argue that. Don't argue that. We need to embrace where corrections is. We need to embrace that. And we're vulnerable. But the reason why I want to embrace the law enforcement title, and I want us to embrace that, is because what I'm hoping to achieve here is that people will look at us differently. They'll respect us for the job that we do. But if we don't respect ourselves and want to evolve, then how do we expect the outside to do that? And going back to understaffing, right now we're hiring in desperation because we got to fill these empty positions. Got to fill them. But nobody wants it. So now it's not about quality. We're not vetting for people. It's about quantity. I need bodies. And that's going to be sad. Because me working the front line, I'm going to trust the people that you're putting next to me. Who are you putting next to me? Because if I'm seeing that there's better offers somewhere else, then I really want to know who you're putting next to me. Because I'm scared. I'm afraid. And I trust you. That's the problem. I'm trusting you to vet the right people for this job. But now I'm starting to think that where we're at now, that's going to be impossible. And when you're giving us numbers, you're only giving us quantity, not quality. And that's scary. On another note, the discipline, being serious and consistent. Texas the other day put to death an inmate by the name of Pruitt, who took an officer's life by the name of Nagel. It took about 19 years for this to happen. And of course, I post a video on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, and there's some feedback as to whether he was innocent or not. And again, people could have their opinion on that. But then one person says, well, that's why we should abolish the death penalty. Let me tell you something. When you work behind that wall and people have nothing to lose, there has to be serious sanction. Because if they don't have serious sanction, guess what? There's nothing protecting us behind that wall. It makes us vulnerable. That's why we, as front line, need laws that support us. Because then we can walk with our head held high. We can be more confident in what needs to be done, not just from ourselves, but what we expect from the public. Because right now, we don't feel that. We feel that there's more love going to the people that have committed foolish acts on the streets. And our job is to supervise them. Our job is to supervise them in a world that is very, very dangerous. I'll keep it simple. And if we don't follow through with punishment, if we don't follow through with serious sanctions, then there's nothing to deter them from acting out again. You know, there's got to be a risk. Inmates act on minimal risk and great reward. But the problem here is that we need to prevent. And part of prevention literally is serious laws being passed that promote a zero tolerance to any act of aggression to those who work in corrections. Right now, there have been more moves to end solitary confinement on a notion that it's inhumane. It's not. Get yourself educated. See the practice. Understand the practice. It's not. They hit aggressively with programming. We do what we got to do to make sure they're not forgotten, but we need that avenue escape to keep staff safe, to keep inmates safe. You're creating a world for us that's very hard for us to manage, but yet holding us responsible for those outcomes. That's unfair. Get us involved. Let us talk to you. Let us tell you what we feel we need. Let's work together collectively so we know that we have a shared interest. Let us be part of the team that affects change. We're frustrated right now because these riots that are occurring, it's a trend now. These attempted escapes this year alone, it's a trend. And the problem here now is each time something is seen as being successful by the inmate population, then it motivates other inmates to try. Because I'm telling you guys, have you seen the messages, especially when the riot in Delaware was on Facebook live stream? There were people rooting for the inmate population. Why? They had hostages. There were people rooting for the inmate population. They were actually promoting justification in the inmates' minds, which makes it more dangerous for staff. It's harder for us to control. And then if they're promoting justification in Delaware, now you have other inmates in other states who may try the same thing because they're going to feel justified. The inmates need to know that the community will not allow this and that they support us 100% in doing what needs to be done. If we don't have that community support, the inmates are going to feel that what they're doing is justified and they're going to go for the glory. But in the process, they're going to be taking us out. And it's sad to see that that's being appreciated by some people in the public. That's very sad to see. In their mind, in the inmate's mind, that's a victory. That's a victory. We have people that work behind that wall every day that's just not appreciated. They're not respected. I mean, that's what it simmers down to. People don't know what they do and they're quick to judge what we do, but they haven't been in our world. And the only time they get a taste of a world is a glimpse. It's a glimpse. A glimpse. 2 officers killed during a riot. It's a glimpse. It doesn't go anywhere. That's why I'm telling people right now, if North Carolina can't speak, then let us speak for them. Because the issues that happen in North Carolina can happen anywhere else. And if we want to prevent, then we can't just look at North Carolina as being isolated from us. We have to look at us as one big giant family. Let's bring us together. What can I do? How can I help you, my brothers and sisters? Because I know right now you probably can't speak, but we can. And the things about right now is I'm sure your concerns, what you're dealing with now, what led to the riot, what led to the potential escape is exactly what we're dealing with. So I feel you, and I feel well enough to know that I can speak for you. I'll help you. You know, I've been in areas, I have never been through a riot, but I've walked in areas where riots have occurred. So I'm very sympathetic because it could happen to me. I could be taken out. People I love, I hold close, could be taken out. So this battle's personal. It's personal. But if we sit there and don't give credit where credit's due, then the people that work behind the wall in the shadows of justice that are not seen, we're kind of indirectly responsible if they get hurt. Because we're not asking the questions to protect them. Just kind of forget about them. What I'm asking for right now is for us to listen and show respect for those people who work behind the wall that risk their lives every day to protect the public. People like Megan Callahan, people like Lieutenant Stephen Floyd, people like Justin Smith, people like Veronica Darden. That's just to name a few. They risked their lives for the greater good, committed sacrifices that the public, they'll never see, but we're telling you right now that these sacrifices are occurring. Listen to us. Respect the profession. Give us what we need. Give us the equipment. Give us the right incentives so we can retain staff. Pass the laws that we need to protect us, that leave us less vulnerable. If you protect us, we can do what needs to be done. But without that protection behind the wall, we're vulnerable. We're vulnerable. If you, the public, start building respect for who we are and what we do, and the inmates start seeing that respect, that alone can deter. Because right now, as I said, they feel justified. Let's stand up. Let's stand up for all our correctional officers, all our correctional staff, and let's tell them we love them. Let's tell them we respect what they do, and let's thank them. Let's show support. Because if we don't, and if we don't provide them what they need, it's going to happen again. And when a story like this breaks, give it its respect. Give it its national airtime. Because we can prevent these. Because Frontline knows what's going on. They know what's needed. They bring it to management. So we need to ask questions. We need to ask management, did you know of this? Why didn't you do nothing? Why didn't you try to do something so we could prevent? That's why we're frustrated. But it's funny, they won't listen to us. But if it gets national attention, then they want to listen. Because then their name's put on Front Street. But the sad thing is, the intent isn't pure. It's still based on their ego. Let me tell you something. If a staff member has a concern, you bring it up, you address it. And if you can't, you at least explain why. Give reason. Don't ignore. That's your connection to the real world. That's your connection to what goes on in inside that facility when you're far removed and sitting back. Let's stop this from happening again. Let's support the correctional staff. Let's ask them, what's going on a national level? What do you mean you're understaffed? How should staffing be? Why do you need these amount of people? What about, how dated is your equipment? What type of equipment would you like to have? Tell us why you need that equipment. And you're talking about laws. What laws would you like to see passed? What can help you? What can make the inmates stop doing something foolish? Or prevent them to try to do something foolish? Or make them at least think twice before doing something foolish? I'm going to end the video on this. Let's ask those on the front line, how can we help you so we could stop these tragedies from occurring? Love you guys. Show's Tear Talk. I'm Anthony.